Hi, Changli is dropping soon along with my account balance as well as her weapon, Blazing Brilliance, which you might have heard by now is not that brilliant of an improvement over the standard 5-star weapon Emerald of Genesis. So let's discuss the value of this weapon in a bit more detail and whether you should pull for it or not. I have my own calculations here and we can take a look at a few different scenarios. The most common upon character release likely being Changli on Molten Rift, with Inferno Rider as the active echo, and then for active buffs at the very least, Rejuvenating 5-piece, Verina's attack buff, Bell, and Verina outro. Under these conditions and this rotation, which I'll get into in my dedicated Changli guide once she's out, we're looking at a 14% damage increase over Emerald of Genesis, which is okay. However, this does not yet account for the value that energy recharge will have on Changli. With a 150 energy cost ultimate, and more than half of Changli's damage coming from her Forte heavy attack into ultimate into another Forte heavy attack combo at the very end of her rotation, insufficient energy recharge will tank your DPS, and 110 or 120 ER is not gonna be enough. I can't yet tell you exactly how much you'll need. We'll have to do some more testing once she's out, and as always it'll also depend on the team, but for now I'm assuming around 140 will be a minimum. If you're nowhere close to that, better prepare Yang because she's gonna have to work overtime. Even at just rank 1, Emerald of Genesis provides more ER than an average substat role, which is one role that can now be something else like attack or crit. And if we account for that, we're now looking at a mere 8% damage increase over the standard 5-star. Now, if you want to play Changli on Moonlit, which is another option, signature weapon's relative value goes up again, but is still only around 11% better than Emerald. If we compare this to the upcoming Changli Yao, for example, we're looking at an estimated 21% increase, which is roughly what we've come to expect when it comes to the performance of signature weapons over other options. But if you want a real outlier, here's Yinlin's chart with a whopping 29% increase. Changli's signature is nowhere near there, and that's not because her weapon is bad or anything, but simply because Emerald of Genesis is just a really good weapon already. Sorry for the interruption. Future or past future? Whatever. AJ here. Right as I edit this video, there are rumors going around that Changli's ultimate cost might be reduced from 150 to 125. Just in case that actually goes through, I went back into my sheet and edited the substats in accordance to that change. And her DPS in general goes up by quite a bit because you have to spend less ER rolls that can instead go into something offensive like skill damage, liberation damage, flat attack, and whatnot. So it's a buff to her. But as for the relative performance of her signature weapon, nothing too crazy happens, to be honest. We were at 8% previously, now we're at 11%, so better for sure, but still not a fantastic value proposition if you ask me. But yeah, I just had to include this to not spread misinformation. If this change goes through, then yes, her signature weapon does benefit from that as well, but not as much as she would deserve, to be honest. And on that note, until she officially releases, anything can change really, so please also do take the other takes in this video with a grain of salt, just to be on the safe side. But yeah, that's it, and back to the video. While we're on the topic of value, another point to consider is that signature weapons for hybrid/dual DPS characters, or whatever you want to call them, usually do not provide the raw increase in overall team damage numbers that a signature for a purely selfish main DPS such as TC or Zian is able to produce. Taking a look at upcoming Changli Yao, for example, whose numbers I happen to already have. Take it with a grain of salt, of course, he might receive buffs or nerfs, though I don't think the relative value of these weapons is going to change much. We're looking at around 820k damage per rotation at level 90 against a level 100 enemy, with Abyss Surges, and around 980k damage per rotation on his signature weapon, or an increase of 160k damage per rotation. Now to be fair, this Changli has all the buffs active that you would expect a main DPS to have, including Yinlin's outro. To make the comparison fair, we'll do the same for Changli and pretend she's our dedicated main DPS. So we're gonna go full juice, add Moonlit, add Heron, and we could add the upcoming Juju's outro for 25% skill amp. You know what, we're gonna pretend that Taochi is a playable character and add 38% instead. Doing so, we end up with 570k on Emerald and roughly 620k on Signature. So you're gaining around 50k damage per rotation for what's essentially the same investment, namely up to 80 pulls on the weapon banner. And considering that 100 bucks only gives you 50 pulls, that is quite an investment. Now, if at this point you think I'm just talking out of my ass here, because there's no way Queen Changli doesn't deal more damage than this, which if you ask me, she deserves to deal millions of damage per rotation, you have to remember that she has one of the strongest outros in the entire game. We look at an S5 Tricia for example, who with all main DPS buffs active deals about 480k damage with Static Mist as our weapon of choice, and we now add Changli's outro to her rotation. Her damage goes up to 590k just because Changli exists in the same team, and Tricia is only a 4-star character, so expect this gap to grow with Encore or other future Fusion DPS characters. So from a character with an outro that is able to boost another character's damage by at least 20% just by breathing the same air, do not expect that character to be dishing out Jinxi, Jian, or even Xiangli numbers just by herself in a vacuum. It's not gonna happen, there has to be a balance somewhere. So to conclude, if you're gonna pull Changli and you already have Emerald of Genesis, and if you're tight on resources and won't be able to get every single limited weapon the game throws at you, and if you're not in urgent need for a second 5-star sword for double sword teams, such as Havoc Rover Dunzine for example, then this signature weapon might present a good opportunity to just skip and save those resources for other options in the future. None of the other current sword users make especially good use of this sword either, Dunzine probably being the best one, but still not as efficient as on Changli of course. Speaking of future-proofing, it also has a really nasty condition to get the passive up and running that requires time and multiple skill casts, so it might not be easily usable on future characters either. That said though, if you cannot stand the sight of Changli holding anything other than her signature weapon, or you consider limit breaking the weapon, then of course, go ahead. It's still objectively speaking her best in slot, so no worries there. I myself will throw one, hopefully lucky 10 pull onto the banner. If I get it, I consider it more or less free. If not, so be it. It's not a huge deal. Anyway, I hope this helped. I will put a link to my sheets in the description if you want to play around with your own stats and scenarios. Don't laugh at my basic ass Excel skills, please. And if you have feedback or questions, you can DM me on Discord. Until then, I wish you the best of luck on your Changli pulls, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks.